Hey everyone, Dockwell here, and welcome to another one of my Dota 2 hero guides. Today we're going to be taking a look at Ember Spirit. Before we jump into the video, I just wanted to say if you like this video, like, comment, subscribe, all of those kinds of things, it really helps. And if you want to see more content into the future, please consider clicking the Patreon link down below and going to my Patreon, signing up for coaching, or just supporting me in general for that $5 or $10 a month. It really helps because for whatever reason, YouTube has not monetized my channel, so I make absolutely no money for making all this content. So in order to keep up making content in the future, if you guys really like it and you want to see more of it, please consider supporting if you can. Now that we got that out of the way, let's jump back to the video. So Ember Spirit is a mid-hero, and he's one of the classic iconic mid-heroes. He's just like a jack-of-all-trades, great all-around mid-hero. He can do a little bit of everything and is actually really good at almost everything. But because of that, he's actually a very high skill ceiling hero. He's one of the most complicated heroes in the game. He's just takes a lot of time, a lot of practice, a lot of knowledge to master. So I probably would not suggest him for anybody that's, just getting into the game, that's really new to the game. Once you have, ranked unlocked, once you have some hours under your belt and you kind of know what the heroes do, I think Ember Spirit eventually is a great hero to add to your kit if you are looking to play mid, if you're a mid player already, anything like that. He's just a great all-around hero. But like I said, because he is so complicated, because he can do so many things, he is a very high skill ceiling hero. So that's how we can think about him in general. But when I say he can do a little bit of everything, what does that mean? Well, he can do a lot of physical damage. He actually can just do way more physical damage from range than almost every other hero in the game. The way he does physical damage is a little bit unique, and we'll see that when we look at his spells, but it's just one of these things that you can just kind of poke people from a distance and do way more physical damage than they're expecting. He can also do a lot of magical damage. He can kind of jump around, do a lot of magical damage. He even does magical damage over time, so he can burst people down. He's very good at that. So he can kind of build for a physical damage build. He can also build for a more magical damage build, just depending on the game, depending on the matchups. He's also very good at initiating fights. He can just kind of jump in, go in the back line, kill people that you need to kill, focus the hero that you need to focus, all these kinds of things. Go with the supports. He can initiate fights. He can also sit in the back and wait for his heroes on his team that love to go in, like a spear breaker, like an axe, whoever it is, somebody that likes to initiate. He can wait for them to go in and then follow up. So he can kind of just adjust based on the lineups and based on the heroes on his team. He can also gank and, team fight pretty well. He's very good at that. He likes to group up and take fights. He's very survivable, can dish out a lot of damage, but he can also split the map very well too. He can split push. He's very hard to catch out. He's very hard to kill unless you bring multiple heroes or you have the right items. You have some kind of silence, or then once he gets BKB, you have some kind of BKB piercing stun. He just is very hard to catch out. So he's going to split the map and drag you all around the map as well. So in that way, he just plays so differently depending on the matchup, depending on the state of the game, depending on the heroes involved, all those kinds of things. He can do a lot of different stuff, and so his skill build, his item build, these can all adjust based on different factors, and so that's why he is just such a high skill ceiling hero. Now, what are some of Ember Spirit's weaknesses? Well, pretty much the same thing that any hero that has mobility, like Queen of Pain, like Storm Spirit, any of these heroes that jump around like he does, any spirit hero, it's the same thing that they're weak to. So silences early on that force you to buy Yules, that's really not something Ember Spirit loves to do if he doesn't have to. He'd rather go a little bit of different items, but he can still do it, but it's not something he loves to do because he would rather wait to buy that BKB later. He also, is not very good against those AoE kind of control spells, so Puck's ultimate, Black Hole, Chronosphere, all those big AoE ultimates that can just catch him out. That's obviously the case as well. And also, I think the biggest weakness of this hero is basically the laning stage. So some higher level players might disagree with me because he does have some good lane matchups, but it's all about knowing what you're doing and knowing the matchup really well and capitalizing on the strengths of the matchup to make this hero have good matchups. But I think overall, for a melee mid hero, he just doesn't have the ability to survive and tank physical damage and tank a lot of damage like other heroes do. If we think about something like a Dragon Knight, he just has a lane presence that Ember just can't compete with in terms of survivability. Even something like Void Spirit with his damage block on his ability to have physical damage block, Ember Spirit just doesn't really have anything like that. Now he does have a magic damage block, but he doesn't really love using that kind of offensively, or to survive in the lane, he would rather use that to go to retreat and farm the jungle or clear the lane pretty quickly and then use it to farm the small camp, something like that. So he just doesn't have the best survivability tools. So a lot of times what you're doing in the laning stage is you're just trying to survive. You're trying to take advantage of, poking the enemy hero down when you can after a few levels. But in the beginning, you're looking to survive. You're looking to get the last hits that you can without dying. You're looking to then retreat to the jungle potentially and, farm stacks, farm the small camp, all of that kind of stuff. And then later, once you get some levels, once you hit 6, that's when you can either, kill the enemy mid laner or you can gank, all these other kinds of things, and that's when you get strong. And in that way, sometimes he can seem to be shut out. Sometimes it's, the Ember Spirit just has to leave the lane. But because of his abilities and because of the dynamic way that this hero plays, he really only needs 1 or 2 items, and they're small items, not even big items, to really just dominate the game and have extreme, insane impact. So he's almost like a Spectre in that way, where Spectre just does a lot with very little because of the nature of her abilities. Ember Spirit is kind of similar. Because of the way that his abilities work, he only really needs to complete like his boots and maybe like a Maelstrom, and that's almost it, and he can do insane damage. Like if you only have a Maelstrom way into like 20 minutes, yes, you're not doing great, you don't want that, you want to eventually be getting a BKB and stuff, but you can still dish out insane damage, you can push waves, you can, have great impact in team fights, so you don't really need all that much. And if you know what you're doing, you know how to work the matchups, you can actually get even more out of the map, and that's why this hero can be just such a good hero to learn, because if you know what you're doing, you can dominate games, and if you have a bad game and you just play pretty safe, you can get what you need out of the map, and then you can still have insane impact in fights. So that's pretty much how to think about Ember Spirit. That's how to play Ember Spirit in general. Now let's jump in and take a look at his abilities. Now that we understand Ember Spirit in general, we can take a look at his abilities and see how he's able to be one of those heroes that's kind of a all-around good hero at pretty much everything because of the way that his abilities work and how he's really able to do a lot with very little and just kind of play in many different ways like I talked about. So first we're actually going to take a look at his Q, and this is probably his most boring spell. It's like his least versatile spell. It's very simple, straightforward, pretty easy to use, pretty understandable. It's basically a root, magical damage root that happens to 2 enemies or 2 creeps, 2 neutral creeps, enemies, whatever it is, in the AoE that you see there around you. So basically I can stand in between these 2 heroes, the dummy target and the axe here. I can press Searing Chains. We can see they are rooted and they're taking damage slowly. So it's not a super long root, but it's pretty good. It also works on creeps, so we can see here I'll just stand in the creep wave and I'll use it. But the other thing to notice is it just happened on these 2 creeps but not these 2, and that's a little bit random. It just kind of picks 2 enemy heroes or 2 viable Searing Chains units within the AoE. So it's one of these things that the skill shot isn't necessarily like when you're using it, it's more like your positioning. So let's say I don't actually want to root the dummy target because this is just, let's say, a creep. I want to root the axe. I want to go out of range of the dummy target so that I can use the Searing Chains to guarantee that the axe gets rooted. So it's just one of those things to keep in mind. This does magic damage at roots, it just 2 random units, but you can also position yourself to make sure that the rooted units are the ones that you want to be rooted. And it's also one of those things you kind of walk ahead of people, walk to certain spots to root people, etc. So keep that in mind. It's not the highest skill ability that he has, but it is something that has a little bit of finesse to it as well. So next we're going to skip this ability and we're actually going to go to the next ability, Flame Guard here, which is also not super complicated. So Flame Guard, it's actually pretty simple. You just click it, and then in the AoE there's like a fire that comes out, and it's basically just like a mini Radiance. It's pretty much just Radiance. It works exactly like that. It does burn damage to enemies, magical burn damage to enemies and creeps in the AoE. It lasts for a decent amount of time, and then it goes on cooldown for a decent amount of time. You can see I'm just going to go in range here, and I'm going to do magic damage until it's gone. So we can see if I highlight there, you can see the duration, the cooldown, the cost and the damage, etc. But the other thing that this does is it also has a magic absorption element. So it's not just like a Radiance that does damage, but you also absorb magic damage when you have this active. So that's also very good for absorbing, a lot of damage. If you go into a fight, in a lane, etc., you just pretty much won't take damage from any magic damage spells up to the limit. But you see there is a limit there with each level. And so that's important to keep in mind. Because there's a limit, what happens if you reach that limit is the Flame Guard disappears. So counter to what a lot of people think is this ability isn't really an ability that you want to use to counter high magic damage heroes like Zeus or something like that. Because what's going to happen is you're going to pop it, Zeus is going to use like 2 abilities, and then your Flame Guard is just going to be gone. and then you don't have the damage, you can't farm with it, it's on cooldown for a long time, it's just not doing damage in fights, etc. The way that this is really good is usually against, especially in team fights, the way it's really good in team fights is against heroes that have like a few magic damage spells, maybe low magic damage spells, high cooldown magic damage spells, but there's not a ton of magic damage, but it's enough that, you know, you absorb that magic damage, and then you still have your Flame Guard active to do damage. So it's not really a strict, you know, magic damage counter in the way that most people think. Although it can be used for that, it is pretty good to just make sure you don't die in situations that, you know, you otherwise would die, so keep that in mind. It still does that, but really that's not the main way that you want to think about it.
The way is clear.
In the lane, it's the same kind of thing. If there's heroes that easily, you know, make this Flame Guard go away, you don't necessarily want to be maxing it out to try to counter that. Sometimes it's just better to max out your other abilities, or especially the one we haven't talked about, Sleight of Fist, instead of maxing this out. But the actual kind of way that you have to think about this ability is more like a farming ability. If it's something where you're going to have, you know, Flame Guard popped and then it gets, you know, bursted immediately, it disappears immediately, then you're going to kind of just want to reserve it for farming, because this is his main farming tool early on. You can obviously tell a pretty decent Radiance, like a free Radiance early on, is really good. You can farm small camp stacks, you can farm the jungle, you can clear waves, you can push out the mid lane very, very quickly with this as well. It's very good to just kind of go to the mid lane, the mid wave, you know, pop your Flame Guard, hit the creeps before the enemy, you know, maybe the enemy mid laner is ganking something, you can just clear the wave really quickly before he gets back and then go back to the jungle so you don't have to deal with him. But keep in mind, obviously, you are a melee hero, so you do have to show in waves. It's not something where you can just walk up to the wave and expect to just do it for free in every single matchup. But this is his main farming tool, especially early on, so keep that in mind. So it is good to usually put a lot of points in this just for farming. And then next and lastly, for his main abilities, we're going to look at Sleight of Fist. So Sleight of Fist is pretty simple actually, and just what you do with it, how you use it generally is just basically it has a range there. You see the green, and then you see this little circle that comes out, and basically what this does is anything in the circle, when I click it, will get attacked by Ember. So we can just use it here, and we see I attack both the axe and the dummy target. It also works on creeps. So you can see there I attack all 4 creeps in that AoE, and you can see while I do that, a little remnant sits where I, you know, used to be, and then I will eventually go back there. That's because Ember Spirit actually kind of like goes to those locations to right-click the enemy. So obviously that does damage, it's pretty good because of that, but if you look at the ability here, it actually does bonus damage to heroes and less damage to creeps. So it is a farming ability, but not innately. Innately, it's not great against creeps. It's more of an ability that you kind of use to poke the enemy down. So this is the way that you actually dominate lanes if you can against the right matchups. Early on, obviously, you're not going to have be able to dominate pretty much any lane. That's really not how Ember works. Maybe against matchups or players that don't know what they're doing, sure. But really what happens is after you get a lot of points in this ability, once you especially max it out, it has a very low cooldown and extra bonus damage to heroes, that's when you can kind of sit back and poke the enemy, especially the enemy mid laner, from long range. Just do it repeatedly over and over till you wear them down and then potentially kill them. And this is how you will eventually dominate lanes if you choose to play this hero mid. The other thing that you can do is in team fights, obviously, you can use this from afar, you can kite in and out with it, and it still does a lot of damage. But this isn't just a damage kind of team fight item, it also, or ability, it also is a good ability for farming combined with Maelstrom. Because Maelstrom, obviously, every single attack allows a proc of lightning to potentially come out and do a lot of damage to everything in that. So basically, because I'm actually going and attacking every creep in the AoE, you can see obviously there's only 2 there, so when the next creep wave spawns, I'll show you how it works. So basically, because there's 4 creeps, I have 4 chances to proc lightning. So you can see there, one Sleight of Fist kind of basically deleted the range creep, and then also like basically got the other creeps to pretty low health. So you can see how I can clear creep waves very, very fast with Maelstrom. And this is why this hero pretty much only needs a Maelstrom plus like completed boots or maybe, you know, a BKB, and that's all you need, and you can do insane amounts of damage. You can farm very quickly, you can have presence on the map, all those kinds of things because of this combination. So that's why Ember can just do a lot with very little. So that's Sleight of Fist and how to use it to farm. Now, how do you use this in combination with his other abilities? Well, you can use this in combination with Searing Chains, like I said, because the way Searing Chains works, where you root heroes that are next to you, you can also root heroes by going there to where the hero is with Sleight of Fist and then rooting them that way. So I'll show you this here really quick. So there, I just rooted Axe, and that's because basically I clicked Sleight of Fist, and then when I was in my Sleight of Fist, you want to press Searing Chains. So this is something that people, it's really not that complicated. People feel like, you know, it's kind of this high skill cap thing, but it's really not that complicated if you just get used to using it. The main way to do it, the main way to think about it, is you want to press Sleight of Fist and then wait for like a split second. You don't just want to like press WQ really quick. You don't want to do it that quick. You just want to press W, and then for like kind of a brief moment, just, you know, that feeling, a feeling of a brief moment, then you press Q. So basically, you just press this, and then just a little bit after, you can kind of see even with the feeling of how I'm doing it, it's a little bit later. So you do this, and then a little bit later, you press it, and then you can root people, and that's how you do it. Because what'll happen is if you try to press it too quickly, like see there, I just pressed it really quickly, and sometimes it'll work, but sometimes it won't. Like it'll just mess up, it'll, you'll screw up, especially if you do it in this way. So let's say I'm pretty far back and I want to Sleight of Fist root this guy. Well, what happens sometimes is you cast it from long range. Like, see how I did that? I cast it, but I'm out of range, so sometimes people cast it from, you know, range that they can't get to. The Ember will try to walk there, and then they'll Searing Chains, you know, too early before you actually get the Sleight of Fist off. So that's the main way that people can screw it up. So just keep in mind that you want to just wait until you're actually, you know, Sleight of Fisting before you Searing Chains. Just wait that brief moment before you do it. I think it's just something that you need to practice. You can get into a lobby like this and just practice it over and over again, and eventually you'll get it, and it's really not that hard to get. Just wait a brief moment and then Searing Chains after that. So those are all of Ember Spirit's main abilities. We haven't even talked about the ultimate yet. So the ultimate is another fantastic, you know, spirit ability that allows him to travel all around, be very mobile, be annoying in team fights, etc. So what this does is it's Fire Remnant. So you can see there's two basically abilities here. And it's pretty simple. It's basically Fire Remnant. You just stick it out in, you know, a random spot. You can put your Fire Remnant pretty much anywhere on the map, and it sends a Fire Remnant there to that location based on your movement speed, actually. So if you are like Omega slowed by Veno or something like that, this Fire Remnant will go really, really slowly. So keep that in mind. It is something to keep in mind if you're like, you usually want to pre-cast this before you get slowed, before you get gone on, so that you can teleport there. Because if you try to in the middle of the fight, when you're super slow, you're just not going to go anywhere. So keep that in mind, just a little brief thing. But what you do is then you press D on or near the Fire Remnant, and then you just basically travel there. And anything on the way takes damage, and anything at the location takes damage as well. So you can see I'll put the Fire Remnant there, then I'll use it, and you can see everything on the path took damage. You can see I'll also do it there. And when I land there, you know, everything that I land around also takes damage. So it's just basically a good damage spell. It's also a very good mobility spell, because obviously I can use it to catch up to enemies, to jump on enemies, to initiate. I can also use it this way, which is the main way that you use farming, is that basically, let's say this is my mid lane. There's an enemy mid laner or supports that potentially threaten me in combo. I don't see them on the map, and I'm a little bit scared. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a Fire Remnant back, and then I'm just going to, you know, casually do my thing. I'm going to wait and see, oh, they're going on me, they're running at me, they used the spell on me, they stun me, and now I'm unstunned. Basically, I just press D in a direction, and then boom, there I go to that Fire Remnant, and now I'm out. Pretty simple. You can even put one in base, TP out, all those kinds of things, and then go back. Or you can also do this kind of like thing where basically you have like a free regen where you put a Fire Remnant out. You can double tap TP to go back to base. You know, you can refill your bottle, do whatever you need, buy an item, and then once you're good, boom, then you pop back out to the lane, and you're right back out to the lane. So it's a very good way to, you know, keep up on resources, all these kinds of things. So you can see how dynamic this hero can be. With the damage it does, with the mobility it offers, with the safety it offers, with the free regen in some ways that it offers, all those kinds of things. Now, there are a little bit of like advanced ways to use this that I'm just going to cover briefly, but don't feel like you have to use all these things. I'm not even that good at using a lot of these things. One of the things that you can do is when you Sleight of Fist, you can actually use Remnant during Sleight of Fist. So we can see here that I used it during that, so I can actually cast it in ways that's like further than I otherwise would be able to, because my hero's actually here, so I can cast it and then I can use it. So I don't really do that often, but it is a pretty high level thing that you can do. The other thing that you can do is like the same way that I showed you before, where you put a Remnant back here and then you kind of like want to, you know, escape, is that let's say I'm in a creep wave and I'm like, oh, I'm going to farm this, but I know the enemy's coming to kill me. What I can do is this, and basically, I didn't really do it there exactly because my Remnant was, or my Sleight of Fist was pretty low. There's only a couple enemies to hit. Let's just spawn a couple more enemies here.
Destiny awaits us all.
So we spawn a couple more enemies. We put a fire in the back. You know, I'm farming. These are creeps or whatever. I know the enemy's coming, so what I do is I sleight of fist, and then during the sleight of fist, I basically click my D, and then my D key, and then my activate fire remnant, and then basically during the sleight of fist, I fly back through. So basically there's no way for the enemy to get me, because during sleight of fist, you're invulnerable, and during fire remnant, you're also invulnerable. So there's pretty much no time that the enemy has to actually do anything to you. So just keep that in mind. That is something that you can do as well. Now, the last thing that I will say is just how to use fire remnants in concert together. So basically you have 3 remnants here. There's a restore time, there's a duration that they have, all those kinds of things. Keep in mind that when I do use a remnant back here, it has a duration and eventually will disappear, so don't get caught out, you know, thinking you have a safety when you don't. But the other thing is you can also cast multiple fire remnants. So you can see I have 2 here. Well, if I press D, which one am I going to get to? Well, it actually depends where, you know, you're actually clicking that ability. It's not enough to press D. You see, I press D, it highlights like a little thing, a little aimer. That's because if I want to go here to this one, I press D and I press closer, so it doesn't actually need to be like on it, but it can just be closer to that one. So then I'll go to this one first, and then I'll fly to that one. And the opposite is also true. So if I have these 2 out and I want to retreat, then I press D and I can go there, and then I'll fly to that one, and then I'll fly to this one last. The same thing works with all 3 remnants. You know, just whichever one that you click the activate fire remnant and then you click closer towards is the one that you will go to. So keep in mind, if you're very far away from a remnant, so let's say you have a remnant up here, and there's a team fight happening way over here on the other side of the map, and I want to fire remnant in. I fire remnant in, but I don't actually want to go here because it's very dangerous. What I can actually do is you can press D, and then instead of going like here, because let's say, I mean, this is not a great example, but instead of going like here, what'll happen is if I press it here, it's still too close to this fire remnant, so it'll go to this one first, and then it'll go to this one. So what I do is you actually press D, and then you press it on the mini-map over here, and I fly to this one, and then I fly out. So basically, you go in, you do damage, and then you go away. So keep in mind that it's not always good enough to like, oh, you have 2 fire remnants, press in the direction on the map. Sometimes you have to use the mini-map to actually get to the fire remnant that you want to use. So that is pretty much Ember Spirit and all of his abilities. There are, I guess you could say, there are ways I could talk about his Ag Scepter, which just makes his ultimate better. His Shard, which also just makes his fire remnant a little bit better. I'm not going to go into too much detail for those. I'm not really going to describe them. You can look up what they do, because I've already spent 15 minutes doing all of his abilities, because they are so complicated. There's so many different things to do in concert. It's a very, you know, complicated and complex multitude of different ways to use this ability, all these abilities in concert together, and you can see how the complication of them makes this hero just such a versatile and well-rounded hero. And that's why this hero can just do so many things. He's such a great, like, stable mid laner, a classic quintessential mid laner in general. So anyway, those are all of his abilities. That's kind of how to use them in general, how to think about them, all the different quirks and ways that they work together or alone, etc. So that's Ember Spirit. Those are his abilities. Now let's jump into a game and see how he's played. Now we're jumping into a replay here of Abed playing Ember mid. And the main thing that I wanted to show you about this lane is actually that despite me saying earlier that Ember's laning stage is like kind of the biggest weakness of the hero in general for like the way to think about the hero, you can still dominate lanes. You can still do really, really well in lanes if you know how to play the hero. It's just that some matchups are just abysmal for the hero. And so I'll show you that as well eventually in a different game. But this game is a good example of how to win matchups. But regardless, in the first wave, I want you to notice what he does. He takes Flame Guard first. He goes into the lane, and he pretty much just tries to secure every single creep with Flame Guard up. Now, obviously, unfortunately for him, he does get one denied, because that's really bad, because if you get every single creep in the first wave, and that means, doesn't mean you have to get the last hits, but at least not have one of them denied. That means you get level 2 after the first wave in the mid lane. And that's very, very important. That's something you want to do. That's why you pretty much always take Flame Guard level 1. And usually if you look at most mid matchups, most heroes actually can't break your Flame Guard level 1 with their level 1 ability. So if we look at Puck here, let's go to his perspective. Illusory Orb is 75 damage, and Waning Rift is 70 damage. So obviously level 1, he only has one of those abilities, so he can't actually break your Flame Guard level 1. Now, level 2, he can with both of the abilities, but level 1, he can't. So even if he uses his orb on you when you have this active, it just does no damage to you, which is really, really good as well. There's only some, like Storm Spirit, I know his remnants will pop your Flame Guard, so you need to just be careful not to get hit by it and those kinds of things, but that's all matchup dependent. From there, after he gets that first wave, you can see now, basically, as I've been saying that, he's pretty much just using his Sleight of Fist because it's relatively low mana cost to just use it on the enemy because it's not great for farming. Like, you can try to secure CS with it every once in a while, but you can see how the Puck is like half health where he's full resources, largely because he just keeps using Sleight of Fist on the Puck over and over again. Now, obviously, this lane is a little bit not just like, it's not just a one-on-one lane because the Tiny does end up, stopping the Puck from getting regen constantly, which does obviously help the Ember out a lot in the lane, but that actually doesn't cause the Puck to die, as we'll see here. We're just going to speed up, but this is basically what Abba just keeps doing. He's just securing his farm, getting as much as he can out of the lane, using Flame Guard potentially to farm creeps or to push creeps in to damage them so he doesn't, get a ton under his tower, etc. Or whenever the Puck isn't really there, he uses this. But then he's constantly using his level 2 Sleight of Fist to just bring the Puck down low. And he's just aggressive in that way because he can kind of just use this over and over again pretty freely. And the fact that you have Bottle and the fact that you have all these runes coming up, he hasn't even gone to get this rune, but he could if he wanted to, if he needed the regen. You could just use this low mana cost spell over and over again, pretty much off cooldown every time, to just chip away at the Puck, to chip away at the enemy mid laner, especially ranged mid laners, ranged intelligence mid laners don't have a lot of armor, those kinds of things. This Sleight of Fist is just really, really good against those heroes. So even though Ember's like first few levels, even though his laning stage isn't always the best, once you get some levels, once your Sleight of Fist has, 3 levels, and even once it's potentially maxed out, you're just doing a lot of damage. So you can see how the Puck obviously had to go back to base because of that regen that Tiny denied. Now Tiny's going to come and deny another one. So this isn't just like a pure 1v1 matchup. I understand that. It's not perfect. But it still demonstrates exactly all of the things that I want you to know about the lane, is that basically you're just trying to survive in the beginning, get the creeps that you can, and then once you get some levels up, like you see he has 3 levels in Sleight of Fist, this is the time where he's just able to completely not dominate the lane. Like, he's not like super threatening to the Puck if the Puck doesn't put himself out of position, but it just allows him to sustain himself in lane, because that's kind of the point of Embers. Yes, if the enemy makes a big misstep, you can potentially kill them, but before you get level 6, your main way is just to poke them down to not let them get aggressive on you, so that you can stay in the lane and you don't have to retreat to the jungle, because obviously you can eventually retreat to the jungle if you're having a bad lane, but you don't necessarily have to if you're able to, get aggressive like we're seeing. So then once the enemy hits 6 and he's still level 5, he's able to actually still get aggressive, just because of the nature of the hero and how much damage he can actually output with this Flame Guard and with his Sleight of Fist. You can see that. It's kind of insane what he can do because of the way that he played the game earlier. He got his boots now, he has his Blightstone, and we can see what happens. He puts a Remnant down, he gets double damage, he comes right back to lane, and because the Puck used the orb, he just gets aggressive and kills the Puck. And that's just something you can do from experience. That's just matchups. That's just him being intelligent and smart and knowing how the heroes work. And then he gets another kill on the Lion because of how much damage he does, not only with a max Sleight of Fist, but then the double damage as well. So that's just like the perfect way to play mid. That's a great example of playing mid from Abed. It's just a great showing there. I think obviously the Tiny did help him out a lot to deny Puck the runes, but otherwise, that's just very, very high skill stuff coming out from Abed. But that's just a perfect example of how to play mid, how to think about mid. In the beginning, you want to try to get your farm, sustain in the lane if you can. If the enemy isn't like zoning you out, that's really good, because then you're just going to get yours. You're going to get what you can out of the lane. You're not going to be super aggressive until potentially level 6. Otherwise, you're just kind of poking the enemy down to kind of just keep them at bay, to put them on, the back foot, to make it so that they can't get aggressive on you, and that's the main thing. Otherwise, you're going to have to retreat to the jungle in other potential matchups that just aren't going your way, and then once you hit 6, that's when you can potentially get aggressive on the enemy mid laner, or potentially gank and kill people like we saw there. So that's pretty much how to play the laning stage, when you can be aggressive, when you can, be on the offensive and sustain in the lane like I showed you here. That's how to do this in this replay. Now let's go to a different replay where you just have a really, really hard time in the lane and see how to adjust to that kind of a lane as well. Now the next replay that I'm going to show you is actually Quinn playing Ember mid, and the reason why I wanted to show you this replay was because it's a little bit different with the way that it works out. Now, he can still be aggressive against the Queen, kind of the same principles apply, but it just ends up working out a little bit differently. He's not as aggressive like Abed was against the Puck after like the mid portion of the laning stage. So the first thing that I wanted to say, actually, and the reason why we're looking at this part, is that blocking is super, super important on Ember. So I didn't mention that at first, but you don't really do too much to contest the runes, and blocking just where the enemy creeps and your creeps meet in the first wave is so important, because getting that range creep, making sure it's not denied, making sure that it's at an advantageous spot, like potentially on your hill or at least at the middle of the lane, is just so important on Ember. So I would almost suggest that you should probably just block creeps like every game on Ember, because even if the creeps go under your tower, it's like not actually that big of a deal. It's not that bad, because Ember, the first few levels, you just are trying to sustain. You're trying to get yours. You're trying to get your bottle. You're trying to get what you can out of the lane. And we just see that with him here. Now, I'm going to fast forward. We can, like, look at the lane, but pretty much the lane is just the same as it was with the Quap. Like, he's basically, you know, sustaining, but you can see how it's a little bit worse for him, especially with the Tiny not helping out like it was. Like, his health is just a lot lower. He just doesn't have as many resources. He looks to get aggressive at times, like he did right there with his Searing Chains, but also look at his skill build. His skill build is he has a Searing Chains leveled that he just decided to do for a potential aggressive play, but he's also going to be maxing out Flame Guard. And this is because he just knows eventually, especially if the enemy brings another hero mid, that he's just not going to be able to have a great time against the Queen of Pain. She just, as she gets more levels, she just has more of the sustained damage over time against him. She's just going to be better against him. And then we see here that a gank ends up coming just like kind of he thought, almost at around 5 minutes before he hits level 6, and he almost dies there. It's very, very close. This is a part of the game that I wanted to show you now. So basically, he was kind of playing the lane similarly to how Abed played against the Puck, but now that that kill threat happened, and he knows that, it's 5 minutes, he's still not level 6 yet, the lane is okay, like he has 21 CS, but it's just not the best. You see the Queen of Pain has 26 with 6 denies. He's not in the most advantageous spot. So what he's doing now, pretty much for the next 5 minutes, is he's just going to potentially, or not potentially, he's just going to only be in the lane when Queen of Pain isn't there. So as soon as she shows up, he just basically decides to do something completely different. He just doesn't even bother, like, fighting her, because especially now, she's 6, he's not. There's just no way he can contest her. So what he does is he goes back to the jungle, he stacks a small camp, he has Flame Guard at level 3, which definitely helps him farm, because he's anticipating a potential time like this in the game, that it's going to come to just, going into the jungle. So we can see that this is what he just chooses to do, and then he only returns to the lane when Queen of Pain pushes it in. So really the only reason that he's here right now is because Queen of Pain isn't here, and Queen of Pain pushed it into the tower. And this is what he's just going to do for the next, 4 minutes or something. He sees Queen of Pain bottom, he says, okay, great, I can actually lane now. I can go lane, I can hit the lane creeps, I can get what I can out of the lane. We can see he's killing that range creep as fast as possible. He's right-clicking as fast as possible because he wants to get out of this lane, because he knows now the Queen of Pain ganked, Queen of Pain's going to come back, and I got to get out of here. Now, he's a very smart player. He's a very good player. So now that the creeps are pushing under her tower, he's getting aggressive on the other side of the map because he knows Queen's going to be dealing with that wave and all these kinds of things. He has a safe remnant back, all this kind of stuff. So he's playing in a very aggressive way, despite the fact that he doesn't really want to be dealing with the Queen ever. He doesn't want to be man fighting the Queen in any real way. So we see the creeps are at a disadvantageous spot. He sees that the small camp is spawning, so he just goes to farm the small camp. So basically, for the last 2 minutes, has he really ever, confronted the Queen? No. And then I think for the next minute or two, he still doesn't confront the Queen ever. Now, he gets aggressive at times to try to clear the wave, but as soon as, he sees the Queen, he's just kind of running away. He just never wants to really fight the Queen in any real capacity. He just has avoided Queen completely for the last 4 minutes. And then I wanted to show you a good reason why he was, avoiding the Queen. I think it'll come up here. Obviously, he's a very good player, so he's getting aggressive at the right times when he feels like, he should get aggressive. But here's, I think, the bad time. He was being aggressive. He wanted to get the 10-minute rune. He came down here to try to get it. He obviously puts a safe remnant back because, he's fighting the Queen of Pain. He wants to potentially kill her or just make her waste an ultimate, but he ends up messing up mechanically. She ends up using the ultimate after his Sleight of Fist ended, and he ends up dying. So, as you can see, that's a little bit of a misplay, but that's like a quintessential or a very good demonstration of why he was avoiding Queen of Pain in general. Obviously, he was trading pretty decently with her, but before, he was 5, she was 6, and even after that, when she was, doing pretty well, he just doesn't want to man fight the queen. It's just not worth his time, not worth his resources. So you can see that's pretty much why. It's a great example of why what he's been doing for the last 5 minutes is the correct play, is just avoiding the Queen of Pain. So that's pretty much how to play and think about Ember Spirit when you're in a matchup that's just not that great. You don't have the best start to just max these other abilities. But then, obviously, we see here, it's 11 minutes. He has these abilities maxed. It's not like the laning stage is kind of over at this point. He has help with his Jakiro here. He's still getting aggressive at times. So it's not like he's just sitting there doing nothing. It's not like he just wants to completely avoid the Queen of Pain no matter what. He can still be aggressive. He can still play well. He has basically these 2 skills maxed out now, I believe. So it's not like, he can't gank, he can't play around the queen. It's just in the laning stage specifically. But now obviously it's 11 and a half, almost 12 minutes, so things change up a little bit once you have, your team all next to you. So that changes things a lot. But in any case, that's how to play the lane, how to think about the lane with Ember Spirit when you're not in a great matchup. Now we're jumping back to the game where Abed is playing Ember mid, and he's having a very, very good start. He's absolutely crushing the game. He's playing very, very well. We're going to go to net worth here. And basically what you want to do when transitioning to the mid game on Ember is you want to look to be aggressive on the map, because your ability to do so much damage and have so much presence where it's very, very hard at this point for enemies to catch you out, to kill you. You want to play extremely aggressive, because it's just so hard with no items, with usually like no silences, unless there's something like, a Sky Wrath or something that can catch you out, or some big ultimate or something. With their heroes they have right here, I mean, really it's only Puck or like stuns from Lion and these kinds of things. And if you're good enough, and this is where the skill comes in, you could potentially dodge a lot of these spells if you know they're coming, or if you wait for your teammates to go in, these kinds of things. Otherwise, you want to play aggressive. And this doesn't necessarily mean on the mid lane, although this is what he's doing because his teammates are here, because they already took top tier 1. This could also potentially mean rotating to the side lane, so if the enemy's diving bottom, if the, your heroes need to take top, he could potentially rotate top, because you're very, very hard to deal with. You can see how he's just kind of like standing here, because they killed the Veno. The Veno isn't defending anymore. He's just kind of like standing here, like daring them to go on him, because he is just so strong at this point. It's very hard to deal with him. And this is how you want to be playing Ember. You don't want to be too passive. Now, obviously, there are games, kind of like in the last one, where being passive isn't the worst thing, but we even saw Quinn kind of transitioning into being aggressive once he had his spells maxed out, his Sleight of Fist and his Flame Guard maxed out, and he had his ultimate up. Like, he was still being aggressive despite the laning stage not being perfect for him. So this is just how you want to play Ember. Now, obviously, in this game, mid lane is the next lane they want to take. They want to be aggressive on mid lane. They want to potentially take the tower if they can, and that's why Veno's obviously coming here to defend. But we can see how he's just going to be aggressive this entire time, playing not only with his team, but just in general. So the entire team comes here to try to defend. They end up using a ton of spells on him, and then he uses his fire remnants to get out, and he just baits insane amounts of spells on there. You see how, obviously, this is very high skill. I think I would have died there. I think all of you watching this probably would have died there. But regardless, like, this is how you want to be playing Ember. This is just the perfect high level. I don't expect you to be this good, but something like this is like, he's really pushing the hero to the limits, extending to the very limits of the hero, but something like this is very, very quintessential Ember Spirit play. You're very strong right now. You're hard to kill. We even see they use so many ultimates and they still didn't bring him down. And look at how he's just chipping away this Veno. This Veno wants to be, defending the tower, placing these wards, but it's so hard for him because, just a few Sleight of Fists and he ends up dying. Then once he has a bunch of heroes here ready to go in on his team, he's just going to be going in, doing a crap ton of damage. He kills off the Veno. He thinks that he goes in the back line for the Lion because he's pretty sure that the Spirit Breaker's dead, although the Spirit Breaker actually does survive, unfortunately, which probably would have been the better kill. But regardless, he goes in, he's extremely aggressive, and this just allows him to put pressure on the map. The other big thing that this does is obviously allowing the Luna to just have complete free farm, whereas the Morphling, although the Morphling is farming pretty well, he's not farming nearly as well because obviously he has to kind of sit there and defend because he doesn't want the Ember and everybody else invading his triangle, invading his farm, so he has to participate in some way, and we can see how effective this is at just creating space on the map and being very unkillable, being very annoying to deal with, getting a lot of kills where he can. It's obviously not perfect. His lineup's very weird. You know, they have Rubik, they have Bounty Hunter. These aren't like the best heroes. I think they're just kind of like very crappy heroes. You know, Bounty Hunter's not the greatest for going in. I just don't love it. But regardless, I mean, this is how aggressive he's being. This is perfect. And then transitioning also in the mid game, this is another thing that you can do on this hero, is that because you have a lot of map presence, not only are you mobile with the fact that you have your remnants, so you can like get in, you can get out, you can dodge things like I showed you before, you can also do what he's doing now, is that he knows bottom needs to be pushed. There's potentially free farm there. He also, his bounty was dead. He doesn't really want to push mid anymore. He doesn't want to be there. His Luna was potentially pushing in mid just to get extra farm. He doesn't want to take the triangle away from his Luna, and he doesn't want to necessarily be top because there's not really a big objective top yet without taking mid tier 1. So he just TP's bottom to clear the wave, and he puts a remnant mid because he knows that at any moment he can just go back mid. So as soon as his remnant, as you saw, we can go back actually. Well, actually, you don't see it here anymore because of the replay glitch. But if you were watching before, the remnant there was about to run out, and he immediately goes back because he doesn't want to be on this side of the map permanently. He doesn't really like that. It doesn't feel great. So he just is trying to push out as many waves as possible while still having a presence mid because at any moment he can go back to mid. And now that he has his Maelstrom, this is the time where his farm really ramps up. So basically, up until you get your Maelstrom, you're looking to farm only when you have your Flame Guard up, and you don't farm really that well without it. That's how you kind of push lanes and stuff. Otherwise, you're being aggressive on the map, ganking. But now with Maelstrom, you farm extremely quickly. You can use your Sleight of Fist not only to harass enemies, but you can also farm and push out lanes very quickly. This game is a little bit more like kind of just on the boring side because obviously the mid wave is where they need to push. But him making pressure bottom, putting pressure mid, doing all these things is exactly how you want to be playing this hero. And we can see he's doing the exact same thing again. So he's pushing out the lane that nobody else wants to push, and then he's potentially still having a remnant mid to defend the tower, to push the tower if necessary. So he's basically just making all this space on the map. Now, not every game is going to be like this. Not every game is going to be something where you want to go down here and you want to put remnants mid. You know, it just depends on the game. That's why this hero is so versatile, because you can just do so many different things with him. You can have so many different map presences. You can be aggressive. You can, you know, push lanes that nobody else wants to push. You can go top. You can just, there's so many things you can do. So it's all, you know, depending on the game. But this is, I think it's just a great example of how you can be aggressive when you need to with your team, when you want to be. You can push the lanes nobody else wants to push while still having presence on the map mid. All those kinds of things. It's a great example of what to do from like basically the mid game, the 10 to 20 minute mark, etc. And now here's an example. I don't think the gank is going to work out on the Morphling, but if that was any other hero, they could potentially gank the hero as well. So that's pretty much how to play Ember in the mid game. You want to be looking to gank. You want to be looking to be aggressive when you can, when you have the level advantage. But you are also able to have an extreme presence on the map with Maelstrom, pushing out waves and using remnants to be all around the map. So that's pretty much the mid game with Ember. So I actually should have just let the replay keep going, because basically what I wanted to show you next is how to team fight with the hero. How to think about fights in general. Obviously we saw the mid-game aggression, but we see a fight going on mid. Kind of like I was saying, he wanted to have that presence mid as well. And this is a great example of how you can clean up fights. So obviously it would probably be better if he was here for the beginning of the fight so that the Luna didn't die. But we can see how he does a lot of damage with Maelstrom. He does a lot of damage with the Sleight of Fist. So having heroes that are low HP like this is just amazing for Ember Spirit. He just wants to clean up. He can clean up fights so well. So despite not being there at the very beginning of the breakout of the fight when they picked the Luna off, he just did a ton of damage there. He was cleaning up fights, cleaning up kills very well. Ended up turning the fight for them. Obviously, he did have the DD as well, which helped immensely, but it's just one of these things that this is a great example of how you can kind of, you don't have to be the initiator, you can kind of wait in the back. Now, this is the other thing too, is knowing the limits of this hero. He understands that the Puck is dead, the Lion is dead, and those are really the only heroes that threaten him in any significant way, because they are the heroes that lock him down. So as long as they're dead, or they don't have the damage, he doesn't care what happens. So now the Morphling is dead, the Veno's dead. Now they have potentially stuns for him, but because there's still two heroes dead, he just has no fear. He knows that they're far ahead. He knows they don't potentially have the spells like Lion Finger and other things like that for him, because they probably used them in the last fight. So he's just looking to be ultra aggressive, and this is just how you make space, and you can also just kill people really well. So he sees Puck bottom. He knows that without the Puck, they pretty much don't have a way to kill him, and look at how aggressive he's now being on the Lion, because the Lion wasted stun. He knows there's nothing they can do, and now the Lion versus and the the Spirit Breaker have just no shot without the puck. Like, they need a bunch of heroes to kill him. So when he sees on the map that the heroes that potentially kill him are not there, he's just being ultra aggressive. It's just insane. And this is how this hero works. Is basically when you know that they can't kill you, when you kind of evaluate that, oh, they need XYZ hero to kill me, and those heroes are either dead or not there, you just have free reign to basically do whatever you want in fights, whatever you want on the map. And that's exactly what we're seeing there. Is that he can clean up super well in fights, even if he comes late. He can also be ultra aggressive at the right times when the moments are right and, you know, the heroes on the map are correct. And this is just the perfect example of how to play Ember. Obviously, this is just a quintessential Ember game. This is just a fantastic Ember game. And they're absolutely stomping largely because of his play. So it's not like, you know, there's no, like, big, even team fight that's happening here. He's just pretty much picking people off constantly because he's just a god at the hero. And he just understands the perfect way to, you know, get aggressive and when to get aggressive, etc. But I think that's just another great example of how to fight, how to analyze when to go in, all these kinds of things, and how to use the hero to its maximum capability in that mid game when you're being aggressive. And pretty much everything from there, just kind of, it's all the same, just with more items, with more understanding of what kills you, etc., etc. Now, for the last clip, we're jumping back to a Quinn game. This is a different game, but it's still Quinn playing Ember Spirit. And basically, I wanted to show you this entire sequence. So the first thing that I'm going to show you is basically how to split the map. So we already showed on Abed playing Ember how he was super aggressive. He was using his hero to the limit. They were winning. He also, you know, went bottom like this to split the map, all these kinds of things, and use his remnant to have presence in the other lane. That's a little bit different than what Quinn is doing right now. Quinn, although he does want to have presence mid, and that's sort of why he remnanted mid and came bottom, what he's really doing now is splitting the map because they are losing. And this is a little bit different, right? What he's doing now, it's not like he wants to go mid because, you know, there's a potentially really good fight there that he wants to fight with his team. He's doing that by, what he's doing now is he's remnanting back to make sure that he has a safe place to go in case they try to go on him in any of these lanes. He also sees that they're top, so they have a ward on the enemy top, so he feels a little bit safer doing this. But they do have a Spirit Breaker. They do have a lot of potential catch stuns. They have a Pudge. They have, you know, Earth Split, all these different kinds of things that can potentially catch him out if he does get charged, these kinds of things. So he wants to be very safe. So this is basically how you play Ember. And you can see there, he knows that as soon as that creep wave spawns, if he doesn't, like, just try to clear it as quickly as possible and get out, he's potentially going to get gone on by the enemy. He no longer sees them top. They've had enough time to potentially TP back. This is exactly how you have to play Ember from behind, as you remnant to a, you know, a place further back in the lane, or even all the way in base, potentially even in Fountain. Then you TP out, or you go to the place, you push it in, and then you have to get, you know, it's kind of that fine line of how aggressive do you get based on how, you know, easily they kill you. How far do you push the lane before you remnant back? And sometimes what you want to do, like I even showed you in the abilities part, is you want to sleight of fist the last wave and then remnant back before they even have a chance to kill you in that way. Then the next thing that I want to show you, which is, this is the transition from a losing point of view where they're down 5k, how to play this hero when you can't really just go in because he's going to soak a lot of magic damage. He's going to get clicked by the Medusa, so he can't just be super aggressive like he was, or like Abed was in the last game. So this is how a late game team fight happens, when you kind of have to poke and you can't be super aggressive. So see how he kind of sits back, he uses a sleight of fist on 4 heroes. He does go in for a brief moment, but then he actually remnants, like he remnants in, but only just barely, and then immediately gets out. And he's kind of just sitting in the back poking because he knows there's no way he can fight Death Prophet, or even though Death Prophet has her ult going, there's no way he can fight the Medusa. There's no way he can fight all of them kind of one-on-one. So we see that he's just letting the other heroes go in. He's letting the Morphling go in. He's letting the tree go in. And then finally, when he sees a good spot to, you know, go in on the enemy, that's when he uses it. So he'll use his remnants. He saves his remnants to try to kill off the Leshrac and stuff there. He used some remnants to try to kill off the Spear Breaker, etc. But he's just kind of sitting in the back. He's waiting. He's poking with his sleight of fist. He's waiting to use his remnants until, you know, they're the most viable time, till he sees somebody out of position, till he knows they're alone and they can't turn on him. I think that's just a perfect example of how to use Ember, how to do a late game team fight from behind, or even if you're ahead but you're in a position where you can't be the first one going in. You know, they're strong enough. They have Pudge Hook, they have Pudge Ultimate, they have Spirit Breaker Ultimate, Spirit Breaker Charge, they have the Leshrac spells. He just can't go in by himself like we saw in the last game. He can't just run in like a psycho there because they're not ahead. He doesn't have the items to do that, and they can potentially just blow him up very, very easily if he does that. So that's a great example of how to sit behind. He also has heroes like Tree, like Morph, like Death Prophet that can go in. They can frontline a little bit for him. They can soak some of the spells, and him poking people down with Sleight of Fist is significant. That's a good amount of damage. You can see he had Sleight of Fist on 4 heroes there, and they took a lot of damage there. And then as soon as the scrappy fight kind of dissipates, a hero or 2 die, then he uses his remnants to get secured kills on heroes that are out of position. That's the perfect example of how to use Ember in the late game. So that is my Ember guide, guys. I hope that was helpful for you. Obviously, I can't cover every single aspect of Ember. This is just such a complicated hero. He has so many different ways to play, so many different methods, so many different matchups that you need to consider when you go in or when you sit back, or just all these different kinds of things. But those are the main points. How to lane with him, how to be aggressive, more in the mid game when you are very strong, how to split push when you're from behind, even when you are ahead, how you can split push the map as well, how to be super aggressive when you're ahead and you can kill the enemy when they don't have the correct heroes, and then how to team fight when you're from behind, making sure that you're just getting out and all that kind of stuff. So that is my Ember Spirit guide. As always, guys, like I said, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it helps you play Ember. He is a very, very fun hero. As always, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, all of those kinds of things. Visit the Discord if you haven't already. You can request a replay review there. If you want coaching, go to my Patreon. And also, just consider supporting me in general at my Patreon if you haven't already. So, as always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.